Welcome to another episode of Morning Mojo with me, your host Shane Solomon. Today I'm delighted to join on the sofa with the wonderful Dr Johanneke Kodde. Is that correct? Is that pronounced?
Yes, well done.
Well, it's one of those, you don't come across names like this very often in Cornwall. So tell me, where are you from?
I'm from Holland, the Netherlands originally.
What a pleasure. What a pleasure. Now, we're going to get straight into the content. This podcast is all about inspiring and uplifting people on their day, and wherever they are listening to this or watching this, hopefully we bring some value for you. I know we're going to do that. Let's start from the journey. So you are a doctor, and a doctor of what? Just explain.
I'm a GP, so that means I'm a medical doctor and then trained an additional specialty as a general practitioner. Mm-hmm. I did my original training in Belgium, actually, and then came to the UK when my husband had a job in London, did some hospital work jobs, and then we moved to Plymouth. And then I did my GP training in Plymouth. So I'm kind of well-versed in the NHS by the time I then had a partnership in the wonderful seaside town of Loo. And
Lovely.
That's where my kind of doctoring journey started. Well, it started before that, but where my GP journey started.
Well, there's lots to talk about in 20 minutes today, that's for sure. There's so many questions I've got for you, but let's kind of start with that. Health is wealth, really, at the end of the day, isn't it? Wouldn't you agree? If you're healthy, then it's a great footing to get on in life.
Yes, I agree with that. I think we need to take these concepts maybe a little bit wider.
Okay.
So health is a healthy body, that's the first thing that comes up for people. Mm. But health is also a healthy mind, healthy emotions, and really where this is an interesting concept where the wealth comes in is that I look at wealth as abundance. Mm-hmm. And I think if we also embrace what our soul and our real inspiration is in life, and where what our best way of being is, then we can be wealthy and we can feel wealthy. And it's kind of they're also intertwined, that if you only concentrate on your health and doing it kind of top down, where you're doing rather than being, you can get yourself really sidetracked and kind of mind boggled by all the advice out there.
Sure.
All the different tools, all the different devices. Mm-hmm. And there's so much out there, all the different diets, there's so much. But if you actually take a step back from that, you and look at where is my natural genius, is a big word, but where do things flow naturally and easily? Mm-hmm. And where do I get stuck, and where does my mind talk about all these things that I've learned from other people, rather than where I want to go from my soul or my inner desires, then a lot of that noise falls away.
Sure.
But you do need to kind of take the time to step back and relax and take time for rest sometimes, and for stillness.
Sometimes easier said than done, of course, but I know how important it is. Now, I wanted to talk about your kind of step away from the NHS side of things and, going in to do your own holistic approach.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that? What's the reasoning for that?
So I've always loved being a GP because it is about life. I'm less interested in people's illness than I am in their life. So I've always wanted to hear their stories and what else is going on, what relationships, what jobs, what are people's aspirations. And GP to me was the closest type of doctor that could do that, where you can always get nosy, so to speak, where you can ask lots of questions. And initially, I think as a teenager, I was interested in spiritual stuff. And then I decided, let's just get a foundation, be a doctor, and then I can go there later. But when I started doing my medical training, you kind of get funneled into this conventional model. And because I've got quite a logical brain, I just kind of went with that. And life was busy, and I was lots of fun and lots of friends and kind of a lot of beer to drink in Belgium as well.
Great beer, actually. Yeah.
And the pubs don't ever close.
Oh, what a
So
pleasure.
yeah, I just like
But drink responsibly, of course.
stumble home in the morning when other people went to work. Anyway, I kind of got a little bit sidetracked into just doing it that way. And then my way of breaking it open again was doing general practice because it's general. And then we moved to the UK, we had a family, and life just got quite busy with that. So what I did is I worked part-time so I could be there for my family. And I tried to do the GP job as best as I could. I became a trainer, so training other GPs, and became a mentor. And I was always just interested in the behavior of people and how their behavior led to certain outcomes, like habits, and how then their habits led to illness, and how sometimes, it seemed to just happen. And I always try to get under the surface with people and kind of meet them at a level where they felt that they weren't being judged. So that was my way of doing general practice as best as I could. And then a few years ago, our middle child, just after at the start of the pandemic. So the pandemic was really intense because obviously having to keep up with all the rules, and for a lot of people that was a time of rest, but for me it was like
Busiest
full
time.
responsibility.
I did applaud you on the Thursday night, you know that.
You did
Every
it?
Thursday
Yeah.
I applauded you and the rest of the NHS.
Yeah. But it was like an adrenaline fueled few months, because every day there was about 20 emails with different guidelines and changes, and it was like, anyway, went through that. And then my daughter went back to school after the first lockdown. She, what I call, decompensated, so she started having extreme tics and anxiety, and she was constantly moving and making noises, and we were like, oh, this is odd, what's going on? But we kind of went with it because we thought, I felt that was a phase. She was readjusting. But rather than it getting better, and the school was helpful and we tried to accommodate things, but rather than better, it just got worse and worse, to the point where all we could think of doing was taking her out of school. But that was against all of my own ideas. There is so many things that we then had to do to adjust to her. So I had to work less. My husband had to change his working schedule. We had to be at home at all points, at all times. We ended up getting a dog just to see if that would help her. We got psychologists and referrals and hospital appointments. And eventually we had to drop a lot of our preconceived ideas about parenting. Know that, for example, we all have to eat at the table together. Well, my daughter didn't tolerate it. She doesn't. Turns out she's actually not autistic, but she is neurodiverse. She has certain traits. And this whole process turned our life completely upside down, and we had to just be available to her. So my commitments to work kind of were minimized. I just went through the motions, and after lots of time doing this, I had kind of time at home, but not, I couldn't do anything for her. She was in her room feeling anxious. We were and eating unhealthy foods and doing all the things that we thought wasn't helpful for her, but it was her process. And I just had to be in the house kind of waiting for her and seeing what I could do for her. So I started to go back to trying to make the world better by listening to podcasts, and then thinking, what do I do and how do I live my life, and getting into a bit of astrology, and just finding ways of discovering what my next stage of life would be. And then it kind of opened me back up to all those spiritual things that I initially was interested in. And with time that developed, and with time I realized I had a bit of a burnout a year later because of all the stresses of the situation. And I realized, do I really want to stay in this particular role as a GP partner? Because even though I got so much out of it, it is still quite limited in the sense of what I think is possible and what I want to offer people. So then I came up with a new concept and a new name for myself, as Body, Mind, Soul Doctor. and a method where I look into all of those 3 areas. And I need at least an hour for a consultation, and if not more. And I started to weave in some of those other things, like human design, which is kind of linked with astrology, and something even more off the wall called Akashic Records, which is more looking into the subconscious. So anyway, it's a long story, but I've never felt it wasn't right, but it was time to expand it and make it bigger, and kind of there's so much more than just a physical body.
Wow, there's so many things you've said in that I just want to come back on, loads of different things. But let's start with one of the last things you said. That's the subconscious. So that leads me nicely into my next question, and that is the power of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So I'm a huge fan of the power of the mind and what it can do. And they're probably only using a small fraction of what we're totally capable of. But what's your thoughts on that? So for people listening, people watching, looking for the power of the mind and what they can untap from themselves, what's your take on the power of the mind?
So the mind, or our consciousness, is effectively what creates our reality. And our experience of life is based on our physical body, because we have these eyes and these ears and this skin. But nobody's experience is the same. So everybody has it slightly differently depending on their physical body. But what I believe, the mind, so there's 2 aspects of the mind. There is the conditioned mind, which is the mind that kind of runs this program of what we've been taught by our parents and our teachers and anybody we come across, and life lessons, so to speak. But that runs on memory and what it has known and learned from the past. But in every moment, our mind can and decides what our experience is by giving it meaning. So if we come across, I don't know, for something simple, if we go outside and it's raining, our physical reaction to that, our emotional reaction, is based on the meaning we give that. If we think, oh, great, the garden needs some water, we might feel happy. If we think, oh, shit, I didn't want this. I'm just about to go out and now I'm going to get soaked. Then we feel cross or angry. So our mind and our thoughts in that moment decide how we feel. So we can, if we become aware of that, then we can use that differently. So that's one way. But if we become aware of, we're repeating patterns. And the other thing is about creativity. So if we want to innovate or create a new life or create a different life for ourselves, then we need to realize what our thoughts are and what our mind is telling us, because we don't really know what's next. And if we wanted something different, we can't. It's that thing of, you can't decide what you, it's a quote from Einstein, I think. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we used to create them. So you need to kind of get to a point where you realize what's going on, and then open yourself up to other possibilities. So the mind, and then what I do with clients sometimes is look at, where do I want to get to? Who do I want to be? And what's that mindset? What's your future? What's their mindset? Do they feel happy about what they've got? Because I don't know if you've looked into this, but if you work that back, if you can feel like that now, you're more likely to take the actions and do the things and attract the things that you would like to become.
Because thoughts ultimately become things.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yes.
And what you kind of think about, you bring about, and things like that, And
what you resist persists.
Indeed. And anything that has ever happened has become a thought of mind first, right? So
Yes.
someone would have thought it, for us
And
to
then
sit on these sofas, someone would have thought about making something to sit on, so
Yes.
everything's
And then when you were talking about the subconscious or the unconscious, and I think you can divide between the individual subconscious, is kind of things that like come up in dreams, things that running in the background, which you're not always aware of, but are still creating the emotions from which you act.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're
Mm-hmm.
angry at a situation, it's probably because you feel resentful or you wish for something different. That's kind of your reaction from that emotion. But there's also the collective conscious or subconscious, which is all of this stuff from everybody mixed up.
Mm.
And this is where you can have whole systems that don't really work, or that have been created, like the NHS. It's a brilliant idea. It's a brilliant system. But the system now is running itself in lots of kind of weird ways. And we've taken some of the individual, what's the word, benefit out of it, because the system starts to run itself. Politics is the same idea.
Sure. Just with the NHS for a moment, what's your kind of thoughts on that? I know you've kind of pulled away from it professionally, but
Mm.
where do you see the future of the NHS? And of course, I'm not holding you to it, but in your opinion, because it can't go on like it is at the moment. Surely, I mean,
No, where do I see it? It all depends on where, obviously, we collectively take it. I see that. I think people individually have got so much information now at their fingertips in their phones. You can look any
Dr. Google.
Dr. Google, but any diet you want, or you feel that drawn to, anything you want to know more about, you can find it out somewhere.
Mhm.
So I think this idea of a doctor knowing better than you probably doesn't make sense anymore. However, you're still going to need people that guide you because they're experts in that field. But the doctor saying, I think you should do that, to me doesn't make sense. Doctor saying, oh, what's going on? How are you looking at this? How we can change how you look at it does work. But I think there's a long way to go. A lot of doctors, nurses, people are still not deliberately, but kind of in that unconscious way, stuck in the way they've always done things. So I can see that it will become more individual, probably more private, in the sense that people start to decide where they put their money. And I'm not sure that's a bad thing.
Sure. I mean, my personal opinions is I like to have private health insurance
Mm-hmm.
and take a bit of the strain off, even though I pay into the system. And I know a lot of people say, "Well, I've paid for it, I should have it," and all this sort of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, we've just got to take responsibility for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And and if there's people like yourself that are there privately and you can access that, and if you now I know not everyone can afford it, but and I can't really afford at the moment to do it, but there's payment plans, there's different things you can do.
Well, I come from a country where that's all there is.
Hmm,
There's loads of different insurances, different tiers, different ways, and there's a basic package, and that's a system that works quite well
hmm,
because you have some flexibility in what you choose. And you can get alternative therapies and you can get other things to a degree paid for with your insurance, depending on which one you choose. I mean, it's going to take a while before a system like that gets implemented
sure.
if you're coming from an NHS, but doesn't mean it's not possible.
No, and I know there'll be different people that are well, I can say, unluckier than others, and they really do need a bit of assistance. So I think that's great. But I think where people can, they should try and look after themselves in terms of paying for
There needs to
healthcare.
be a fallback, isn't it?
Whether
Yeah.
that's NHS or coming to someone like yourself. I knew this was going to happen. The time is really whizzing by. But do you have any kind of famous kind of quotes that you like, or quotes you live by that you've been inspired by?
Yes, there's the Four Agreements. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
This is a Toltec wisdom, the principles, and I think they're very powerful. The first one is be impeccable with your word, which means be very careful what you think and say. And that includes gossiping, includes negative self-talk, all sorts. Don't think they take anything personally. Is the second one. So anything that happens to you by somebody else is actually not personal. It's what they make of the situation. So
Okay.
that can help you deal with a lot of difficult interpersonal situations. The third one is don't make assumptions. So if something happens and you immediately start assuming, well, this is because that and that and that, you can get yourself into a whole kind of spiral with it, which may not be true at all.
Hmm.
And the final one of the four agreements is always do your best, which just means you can only ever do the best you can with your present situation, with your present knowledge, your present experience, and your present awareness, so to speak. So it also doesn't help to judge yourself or others, because if you judge others, you judge yourself, and the other way around.
I like it. I like it a lot. And then just to sum up, what is life all about? I think I can ask you this question because we're here for a relatively short time, really. And we had a guest on, Chris Bentley, and he said that legacy is very short, really. And
Mhm.
yeah, and he said that just know that one day it's all going to end. But you know,
I
it's it is. But what it's all about, just to sum up for you, this journey of life that we're all on, and eventually it does end. What's your thoughts?
What life's all about is the experience, the in the moment. So if you can realize that you're only ever living in that moment, then you might as well make the best of that experience. That would be how I see it. And time is relative. We live in a relative universe, or relative concepts here. So I think doesn't mean you can't plan, doesn't mean you can't review the past, doesn't mean you have to condone, but if you can accept and make peace with your current present situation and make the best of that, that's, I think, what life's for. And feel joyful, calm, and love in the process.
I like that. In fact, experiences, it sums it up for me. Life is about experiences, their intensity, and their frequency. And if we can just keep experiencing that and living for the now, and like you said, you still plan, you can plan for everything, but it's just enjoying that moment. And I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. In fact, I could talk to you for hours, which we do not have on this podcast. We've tried to keep it to 20 minutes. Any last parting words that you've not had a chance to say that you would like to say to our listeners and viewers?
What I tend to say is get curious. If you're thinking about your health, if you're thinking about your life, your situation, get curious about how did I get there, and remember you've always got a choice, and you can make it different if you don't like what's going on.
I like it. I like it a lot. So listen, if you're not already connected to Dr. Johanneke Kodde, make sure that you follow her. You're available online to find out about, I'm assuming, website.
Yes, website is bodymindsoul.com.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram is at bodymindsoul.doctor. And you can also try and spell my name.
We'll make sure we put it on the bottom of this video and in the show notes, okay?
I'm on Facebook and Instagram.
Brilliant.
So.
Superb. Well, thank you so much for making the effort to come here today. We really do appreciate it. My thanks, as always, to Megan, and today to Joshua for mixing the podcast as well. As always, share it, like it, love it, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And until next time, I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much.